Alright, here we go. The first book video of 2024. Let me move my very noisy clock in the drawer here so it doesn't make any unnecessary sounds. And let's get into it, shall we? I'm going to do what I did last year, which is to combine a quarter-year crisis book tag and a reading wrap-up of these 3 months we've been living and reading this year. I'm going to keep it short, especially in the book tag part, so if you are interested in any of the books, don't worry, I will come back to them later. The tag question number 1 is how many books you've read this year so far. I have read 19 books this year so far. Number 2, have you already found a book you think might be a 2024 favorite? I think I might not have. The top 2 of these 19 I've read this year have been One of Us is Back by Karen M. McManus and The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. They have been great novels, but I'm not sure if they are going to be top picks for the whole year. I guess we will have to wait and see. Question number 3, your least favorite book of the year. Unfortunately, I've been having many reading disappointments this year so far. I think the least favorite of mine has been Between Us by Mary macfarlane. I guess I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I'm sorry. Question number 4, most read genre so far. Actually, this is a fun one because children's fiction and literary fiction are tied at the moment, which is kind of surprising, to be honest. 5, a book that surprised you. Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. I knew the premise of this book beforehand, but I didn't expect it to get so messy with all the lying that it did. 6, book that's come out in 2024 already that you want to read but haven't yet. I want to read new Finnish translations of Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry and Before Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I'm also looking forward to reading Gabrielle Sevin's new book called Elsewhere. 7, one goal you made that you're succeeding at. I don't make reading goals, but I do track my reading with this reading challenge that my local library has. This has 50 prompts to fill in whichever order you prefer. A couple of prompts that I've done this far have been a book with a black cover, a book where people lie, and a book with a word book in the title. Number 8, one goal you made you need to focus on. There are some really difficult prompts in this list, which I might modify a little to make them work. There's prompts like a book from an author from Mediterranean countries, a book with a piece of jewelry in the title or the cover, and a book where the events take place in 1920s. 9, new to you book influencers for 2024 you recommend. Rachel Catherine is my number 1 book influencer I follow, but I did recommend her already last year, so news to me at the moment is Carrie can read. Okay, that was speedy enough. Now we can move on to go through shortly and sweetly all the 19 books I have read this year so far. Marvel, 12 new stories by 12 different authors. This was my first read of the year, and the year got a really good start with this one. I think this is such a fun collaboration between these 12 writers from both YA and adult realms. I hadn't read any Miss Marple stories before, so it was all new to me. I think the writers captured the style and the characters just the way they were supposed to. Karen M. McManus's short story was my absolute favorite. Dear Evan Hansen by Emmich. My sister gifted us tickets to see the musical Dear Evan Hansen, and I enjoyed it that much that I wanted to continue the experience after the show too. The musical is not based on this book, but actually the other way around. It has been such a success that they made a novel from that same story too. It's very much the same plot, but it's not identical, and I must say I actually preferred the book. It gave so much more insight to Evan's head. The story is about a high schooler who struggles with social anxiety and severe loneliness, and then one day everything changes because of one small lie. Please do check the trigger warnings for this one if you're planning to read it. The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I had previously read the first book from the Inheritance game series, and I wanted to see what this series was all about. This was on the darker side of YA thrillers, and I didn't like it very much. The kids working for FBI sounded a little bit more promising than it actually was. The biggest problems for me were the ones that are usually the biggest problems for me personally. The plot was not believable enough, and it was too scary / dark for me. Thirdly, I also hate love triangles, so that was a big no. You Are Sweet, Beloved and Important by Henriikka Rönkkönen. This is a weird hybrid between self-help and a memoir, I guess. Mainly this book is about encouragement and practical tips on how to treat yourself in a more compassionate way. Henriikka Rönkkönen is a Finnish author, and her Instagram posts have been very popular with the similar kind of content that this book is about. I think that's really sweet that there's this kind of like audience who are ready to start cultivating a more compassionate way of communication. What Happens in Psychotherapy by sanna-kaisa Hongisto. This is a Finnish non-fiction book. I had been wanting to read it, and then I got an excuse to use the reading experience to write an analysis for my studies in Helsinki University. The book wasn't as good as I was hoping for. It was a little bit poorly written and the structure was not great. The most interesting part of the reading experience was to be able to reflect my own psychotherapy experiences in a way that I hadn't before. Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. I wanted to read a romance for Valentine's Day week in February, and I picked this one because I really enjoyed the previous she wrote, which was called When in Rome. I had heard that this wasn't going to be as great as the first one, and I agree. The good girl, bad boy trope is not for me. I still think Sarah Adams writes small-time romances in a relatively unannoying way, which is why I might continue with the other siblings' love stories, which I'm sure are going to come in the future. Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I had been looking forward to this one releasing. That much I reserved it from the library so early. I think I was the first one to get that copy because it was so clean and sleek. That is such a great feeling. Anyway, the book itself was her best fiction this far, in my opinion. The main character Andy goes through a breakup, and then the book follows him trying to understand why it happened. I feel like the beginning and the end were both very insightful and raw, and I really got into the situation he was in. The middle part, however, was where Dolly lost me for a bit, because I kept waiting for the ex to pop into the picture, and she didn't for so long, and then I decided that she's not going to anymore, and that's when she did show up. My favorite character was the 70-something guy, and he was forced to move in with. He was hilarious. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Order of Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. I did my umpteenth reread of Harry Potter's during the winter, and oh boy, it was so excellent. This was my first time reading them in English, and it added a lot of British vibes, which I'm all for. My top favorite book in the series is The Prisoner of Azkaban, but after that come the Half-Blood Prince and the Deathly Hallows. Everything just ties up so well, and the mystery element of finding the horcruxes is interesting every time. Sad though, and the story of Snape equally breaks and warms my heart. Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. I don't fully understand why this has been such a popular read. I mean, the premise is intriguing for sure. Two writers meet up on the night, the other one dies, and the one who doesn't die steals the manuscript of the deceased. It just got more and more absurd as time went on, and I agree with what Jack Edwards just said, that the book was simply just too long. Between Us by Mary McFarlane. As I already said, I was disappointed with this read. I saw it while traveling in the UK last summer, and Emily Henry was blurbing it, and it just sounded so great. I think the biggest problem was that the main turn of events was so late in the book that everything was just up in the air for at least half a book, and it just didn't work. I wasn't invested in the main girl's love triangle-ish situation, and the events didn't make any sense to me. Come and Get It by Kylie Reid. Oh boy, this was another one I was disappointed with. I had been waiting for another novel by her ever since I read Such a Fun Age, and this didn't live up to those expectations. I was so sad. There were so many characters that it took me forever to figure out who was who, and the theme of money was not consistently dealt throughout the book, even though I think it was supposed to be. The main character, Millie, was a great character with her aspirations to save up to buy this abandoned house, and then there was just this big mess in the end. I was hoping for an uplifting read, and this was not it. Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. I was really happy to find out this one was translated into Finnish, so I read it the first chance I got. Historical fiction is not my go-to genre, but this was one of the best I've read. The story of Esme, who grows up with her dad working in the process of making the Oxford English Dictionary, was quite captivating to me. The ending was really sad. That felt super unfair. The Last Battle of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I've been reading Narnia Chronicles for over a year, but kept putting the last one off. I guess it was because the war theme intimidated me, and with everything going on in the world today, it maybe felt a little bit too real. I'm really glad that I did read it, because now the series is finished, and because the end really was encouraging to read as Christian today. C.S. Lewis portrays Jesus so brilliantly and reminds us that his coming kingdom is something else altogether. Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was the last TJR novel I had yet to read, so now I've read them all. This wasn't my favorite out of the 8, but as I've said before, I think it's really encouraging to see the growth from her early work to Carrie Soto is back. Forever Interrupted is a story of a young widow who was married to her husband for only 9 days. I liked the time structure of the now and then timelines, and the ending was really beautiful. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa, moshfegh. I thought this was going to be a memoir, which it absolutely isn't, so my interest went downhill from there. The humor in this book is so dark, it was not my cup of tea at all. I have to say it was technically well written, so my opinion is based mainly on the lack of plot and how just utterly depressing this was. A girl wants to sleep for a year, so she gets medications to do that from the most unprofessional psychiatry of the fictional world. Truth to be told, I did laugh out loud one time while reading it, but all in all, no. And last but not least, actually last but the second best book of the year this far, One of Us is Back by Karen M. McManus. She's a mastermind with both plotting and writing. I love her characters so much, especially Nate and Browen. These books wake my inner teenager in such a good way. One of Us is Back was such a great conclusion to the Bayview trilogy, and I feel like it did a fantastic job tying up all the loose ends and even giving us lots of background from before the events in the first book even took place.